Welcome back to the deep dive. This list you gave us of 10 hackers who changed the world is pretty fascinating. We're not just talking about people who, just broke into systems. We're going to be talking about individuals whose actions led to actual legal changes, changed how the public thinks, even brought government secrets to light.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how these individuals, no matter what their motive was, really forced everyone to recognize the power, but also the potential for, total chaos that the digital age brings.
So you essentially asked us to map out the whole evolution of hacking through 10 key figures.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right in. Okay, let's start with a name you might already know, Kevin Mitnick. He's practically a legend
Oh, yeah.
for his mastery of social engineering.
Hmm.
And instead of, complex code and stuff, he just used psychology. He tricked people into giving him access.
It's wild.
We're talking about top companies, government agencies, all because he was really good at talking.
He was good.
What stands out to you about his approach, and what kind of impact did that have?
What's fascinating about Mitnick is that he kind of highlighted this vulnerability that a lot of people overlook, which is human nature.
Oh, interesting.
He exploited our trust, our willingness to help, and that's not something that a firewall can protect against.
Yeah, that's true.
His case wasn't just a news story. I mean, it was a serious wake-up call.
Right.
All of a sudden, companies are scrambling to train their employees about social engineering tactics.
Right.
And even legislation started to address, these new types of threats.
So it wasn't just about catching him. It was about realizing that anyone could be a target.
Exactly.
That cybersecurity needed that human element too.
Exactly. And, that realization continues to shape how we approach security today. You think about all the phishing awareness training that everyone goes through. That's a direct result of what Mitnick did.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah,
You specifically wanted to explore hacktivists on this deep dive.
I did.
And you can't really talk about hacktivism without mentioning Anonymous.
Right.
And they're not just a group, they're more like a decentralized collective.
Yeah.
You were curious about their impact. So what are your initial impressions of Anonymous?
I think what strikes me about Anonymous is that they represent this new kind of power structure, or maybe a lack of one. It's really hard to track them or to control them because there's no single leader. There's no hierarchy.
Right.
I mean, they've targeted everything. Government websites, corporations, often just trying to expose corruption or injustice, things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they've sparked debates all over the world about the nature of protest in the digital age.
Their actions have been controversial, but you can't deny that they've brought attention to a lot of issues that may have gone unnoticed otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. And they've proven that you don't need traditional power structures to have your voice heard.
Yeah.
Like, a group of individuals can make their voices heard on a global scale now.
Now, let's get into a slightly more chaotic side of hacking. You included LulzSec on your list,
Yes.
and they kind of spun off from Anonymous, but they were all about mayhem and disruption.
Oh, yeah.
Sony, the FBI, they went after huge targets, often just for laughs, seemingly.
Yeah, it seemed that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people questioned, were their methods ethical or not, but LulzSec inadvertently exposed some serious security flaws that, could have been exploited by someone a lot more malicious.
Oh, wow.
So you have to think, if a group whose main goal is just pranks and LulzSec can break into these systems, what's to stop, some well-funded criminal organization from doing the same thing?
So even though their actions were intended as mischief, they forced a lot of organizations to really take a hard look at their security.
Yeah, exactly. It was a wake-up call. It led to, improvements in security protocols. But it also raised some questions about, the ethics of hacking, even if it's done with seemingly harmless intentions.
Okay. Now let's shift gears to a much darker side of hacking. You wanted to know more about Albert Gonzalez.
Yes.
And this guy masterminded one of the biggest credit card heists ever.
He did.
Over 170 million stolen card numbers.
Huge.
That's not playing around. That's a whole different level of impact.
Right.
Hitting people where it hurts, their wallets.
Yeah, their wallets.
Yeah.
Gonzalez's actions weren't just financial crime, though. They really exposed this fundamental flaw in how credit card data was being handled. I mean, before this happened, a lot of people in the financial industry just assumed their systems were impenetrable.
Oh, wow.
But Gonzalez used a combination of techniques like SQL injection and packet sniffing to completely bypass these security measures and steal massive amounts of data.
I'm guessing this must have had major repercussions for the industry as a whole.
Oh, yeah. It led to a total overhaul of payment security protocols. I mean, we
Yeah.
can thank Gonzalez for the EMV chip technology, which made it much harder to steal card data.
Mm.
But his case also shows that no matter how much you improve security, no system is truly foolproof.
Okay. Next on your list is Adrian Lamo, the homeless hacker.
Yes.
He gained notoriety for breaking into systems that belong to companies like the New York Times, Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
But his story takes a really controversial turn when he's linked to Chelsea Manning,
Right.
who leaked classified documents.
Yeah.
So some people call him a hero for exposing those security flaws. Others call him a snitch.
Right.
What's your take on this complex case?
Well, Lamo's story really kind of embodies those ethical complexities that are just kind of inherent in hacking. I mean, he was clearly very skilled at identifying vulnerabilities, but his decision to report Manning really raises these questions about loyalty,
Yeah.
and the potential consequences of whistleblowing.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's one of those situations that makes you really examine your own beliefs about right and wrong.
Yeah.
Especially in the digital age when those lines are kind of blurry,
Yeah. For sure. And, it just highlights the fact that the impact of hacking goes way beyond just the initial breach. It leads to legal battles, political debates, even international incidents sometimes.
Now let's go across the pond to the case of Gary McKinnon. He's a British hacker who was accused of breaking into U.S. military and NASA systems, allegedly searching for evidence of UFOs.
Right.
His case sparked a really big debate about extradition and how far cyber laws can reach across borders.
Right.
What makes his story particularly intriguing to you?
Well, McKinnon's case really shows how complex jurisdiction is in cyberspace.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in the UK, but his actions had major repercussions in the US.
Yeah.
And that led to this, very lengthy extradition battle. It was a landmark case because it forced legal systems all over the world to really grapple with these unique challenges of cybercrime.
So McKinnon's story wasn't just about hacking.
Yeah.
It was about the very definition of a crime in this digital world.
Right, where physical location becomes less and less relevant.
Yeah.
Exactly. It forced us to ask, whose laws apply when actions in one country can have consequences across the globe? And how do we balance national security concerns with individual rights? I mean, these are questions that we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah. You included the Cult of the Dead Cow, or CDC, on your list, which is a group that's been around since the 1980s.
Yeah.
And they're kind of considered the pioneers of hacktivism.
Oh, yeah.
Challenging authority and developing tools that empowered other people to, explore systems and question systems. Why were you interested in them?
Well, the CDC is fascinating to me because they're like this really early form of hacktivism. They had this belief in, digital freedom.
Yeah.
And they wanted to challenge traditional power structures. They were pioneers in developing and sharing tools that gave people more control over their own technology.
So their impact goes beyond just what they did themselves, right?
Absolutely.
It's about the tools and the ideas that they spread that empowered others to do things.
Yeah. I mean, their legacy lives on in the ethical hacking community,
Yeah.
but also in, some of the not-so-noble corners of the internet.
Right.
But it's a good reminder that technology is a double-edged sword. I mean, it can be used for good or for bad.
Yeah.
And it's often up to individuals to decide how they're going to use that power.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, now we're getting into some really shadowy territory with the shadow brokers.
Yeah, these guys were something else.
They released incredibly powerful hacking tools
Uh-huh.
that are believed to have been developed by the NSA.
Oh, yeah.
And what's even crazier is these tools ended up fueling some major attacks.
Right.
Like the WannaCry ransomware attack
Yeah.
that caused chaos globally.
Yeah. It's like a real-life spy thriller.
It really is.
Yeah, the shadow brokers are like the perfect example of how even hacking from a nation state can have totally unintended consequences.
Right.
By releasing those tools, they essentially gave anyone the ability to launch really sophisticated cyber attacks.
Yeah.
And it really brought to light the ethical dilemmas of, governments developing and using cyber weapons.
I mean, it makes you wonder if these tools can fall into the wrong hands so easily. Should they even be created in the first place?
Right. That's a debate that's still going on today. The shadow brokers kind of exposed the fact that we're living in a world where cyber warfare is a very real threat.
Yeah.
And the line between, offense and defense is getting blurrier all the time.
Next up on your list is a group that really highlights how hacking and geopolitics are intertwined.
Hmm.
The Syrian Electronic Army. They are believed to be linked to the Syrian government,
Right.
and they've targeted media outlets, basically anyone who's critical of the regime.
Oh, yeah.
What makes their methods particularly noteworthy?
Well, the Syrian Electronic Army is like a really harsh reminder that hacking can be used as a tool of political repression.
Oh, wow.
They've been accused of spreading disinformation, defacing websites, launching denial of service attacks just to silence anyone who disagrees with them. Their actions show how governments are using cyber attacks more and more to manipulate what people think and control the story around certain issues.
It's kind of disturbing to think that information warfare is becoming such a powerful weapon.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning, and it raises questions about free speech and how technology shapes political discussion these days.
Thankfully, not all hacking stories are dark.
Right.
You specifically wanted to talk about Marcus Hutchins,
Yeah.
the guy who stopped the WannaCry ransomware attack that we were just talking about.
Yes.
And he found a kill switch in the code, saving countless people and organizations from losing, massive amounts of data. What makes his story so inspiring to you?
Well, Hutchins is a perfect example of what people call a white hat hacker. He's someone who uses their skills for good.
Right.
His quick thinking and technical expertise literally prevented a global catastrophe. It's a great reminder that hacking isn't good or bad in itself. It's all about what the person's intention is and how they use those skills.
Yeah. It seems like throughout this whole deep dive, we keep coming back to this, this duality of hacking.
Right.
It's a tool that can be used for good or for bad.
Right.
And it's constantly making us question how we think about, ethics and the law, even national security.
Yeah, that's a great point. The stories we've talked about today really show that hacking isn't some isolated thing. It's really closely connected to almost every part of our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it affects geopolitics, social movements, the economy. It even challenges how we think about privacy and security.
I gotta admit, some of these stories have been a little unnerving.
Yeah.
It's clear that there are people out there who want to use these vulnerabilities to hurt others or for their own personal gain.
Right.
What can we do as, everyday people to protect ourselves in this, increasingly complex digital world?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is just awareness. Just understand that these threats exist and learn about common techniques that hackers use, like phishing, social engineering, things like that. Be really careful about what you share online.
Yeah.
And take steps to secure your accounts.
Yeah.
Use strong passwords, two-factor authentication, all that good stuff.
So basically just be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly. And if you do become a victim of hacking, don't be afraid to report it.
Okay.
There are resources out there that can help you recover and prevent it from happening again.
One thing that really stands out to me is just how different all the motivations are that we've seen in these hackers.
Yeah.
Some are driven by ideology, some by profit, some just want to expose flaws, and some do it for the thrill.
Yeah, it's true.
What do you make of all these different motivations?
Well, I think it reflects how complex human behavior is.
Okay.
We're all driven by different things.
Okay.
And the digital world just gives us a new space for those things to play out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to remember that hackers aren't all the same. They're individuals, each with their own story, their own beliefs, their own goals.
And it seems like the line between good and bad hackers is often really blurry.
Yeah, it is.
Like Adrian Lamo, he exposed those vulnerabilities, but then he turned in a whistleblower.
Right.
Where do you draw the line when it comes to ethical hacking?
That's the question that people have been debating for years, and there aren't any easy answers.
Right.
It's this constant balancing act between security, transparency, and individual rights. But I think one thing we can all agree on is that we need to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
We need to challenge our assumptions and work together to develop ethical frameworks that can guide us as things change.
Yeah. It is inspiring to think that hacking, even though it gets a bad rap sometimes, can be a force for good.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And, I think that's something that the media doesn't really focus on very often. Hacking is really all about problem solving and creativity and pushing the boundaries of what technology can do.
So much of this deep dive has been about the individuals who, made the headlines and stuff, but I imagine there's this huge, unseen community of hackers out there who are quietly doing their thing.
Oh, for sure. There's a whole ecosystem of ethical hackers and security researchers and just tech enthusiasts in general. And they're constantly trying to, Find those vulnerabilities and improve security systems and just, make the digital world safer for everyone. They don't always get the credit they deserve, though.
Yeah. This has been such an eye-opening journey through the history of hacking. As we wrap up, is there anything you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive?
I hope they have a better understanding of just how complex hacking really is and what a huge impact it has on everything. I mean, it's not just about breaking into systems. It's about how technology, ethics, and human behavior all kind of intersect.
Yeah, and that it's a landscape that's constantly changing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. New challenges and new opportunities are popping up all the time. It's a good reminder that we need to stay informed, be careful, and think critically about technology's role in our lives.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of hackers who shaped history. And to our listener, we hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity. Remember, the digital world is always changing, and it's up to all of us to shape its future. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.